This is the statement that I am giving right now to the House Intelligence Committee because they steadfastly refuse to hold this hearing in public and refuse to release the transcript. I have no choice but to come here to Infowars.com so that you can hear precisely what I'm saying to the U.S. House Committee this morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Ranking Member, committee members of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and staff. My name is Roger Stone. I'm most interested in correcting a number of falsehoods, misstatements, and misimpressions regarding allegations of collusion between Donald Trump, the Trump associates, the Trump family, the Trump campaign, and the Russian state. I view this as a political proceeding because a number of the members of this committee have made irresponsible and indisputably and provably false statements in order to create the impression of collusion with the Russian state without any evidence that would hold up in a U.S. court of law or the court of public opinion. I'm no stranger to the slash and burn aspects of American politics today. I recognize that because of my long reputation and experience as a partisan warrior, I'm a suitable scapegoat for those who would seek to persuade the public that there were wicked international transgressions in the 2016 presidential election. I have a long history in this business. I strategize, I proselytize, I consult, I electioneer, I write, I advocate, I report, and I prognosticate. I'm a New York Times best-selling author, and I have a syndicated radio show and a weekly column. And I report for Infowars.com at 5 o'clock Eastern every day. While some may label me a dirty trickster, the members of this committee could not point to any tactic that is outside the accepted norms of what political strategists and consultants do today. I do not engage in any illegal activities on behalf of my clients or the causes which I support. There is one trick that is not in my bag, and that is treason. As someone whose political activism was born from the anti-communism of Senator Barry Goldwater and President Ronald Reagan, and whose freedom-seeking family members were mowed down by Russian tanks on the streets of Budapest in 1956, I deeply resent any allegation that I would collude with the oppressive Russian state to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. My colleague, Michael Caputo, voluntarily sat in this very chair a few months ago and gave what I believe were candid and truthful answers to those who cared to sit in on his interview. And yet, when he was done, he was falsely accused of perjury by a committee member who did not even have the courtesy to show up for his interview. He was eviscerated by some committee members and consequently by the press. The most unfair aspect of this turn of events and the behavior of some committee members is that this committee refuses, to this day, to release the transcripts of his testimony for the world to read and judge for themselves. Multiple members of this committee have made false allegations against me in public sessions in order to ensure that these bogus charges receive maximum media coverage. Now, however, you deny me the very opportunity to respond to these charges in the same open public forum in which they were made. This is cowardly. Fortunately, we will have the opportunity today to take the exact words of some members of this committee and examine them in order to uncover the lies. Members of this committee, as well as some members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, aren't alone in their irresponsibility. On January 20th, 2017, the New York Times reported that the intelligence services were in possession of emails, records of financial transactions, and transcripts of telephone intercepts, which proved that Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, and Carter Page colluded with the Russians for the benefit of Donald J. Trump. So where are these records? Can this committee or the intelligence agencies produce them? I didn't think so. Now, nor is this responsibility entirely partisan. Senator John McCain told CNN that I should be, quote, compelled to come before the Senate to explain my ties to Yanukovych and the Russians. The answer is very simple, Senator. The answer is none and none. In fact, I worked against Yanukovych's party in the 2006 parliamentary elections in Ukraine, and I have no ties to any Russians. Given this committee's consistent refusal to allow me to testify in a public session, in the interest of compromise, I repeatedly requested that the transcript of my testimony here today be released immediately upon conclusion of today's session. Even this constructive suggestion has been summarily rejected. What is it you fear? Why do you oppose transparency? What is it you don't want the American people to know? I can assure each of you I will not let myself be a punching bag for people with ill intentions or a political agenda. Understand, I will expose the truth in every forum and on every platform available to me. As a 40-year friend, advisor, and supporter of Donald Trump, I have continually urged him to run for the presidency beginning in 1988. When he decided in 2015 to become a serious candidate against a weak slate of opponents, I became one of the Trump campaign's first consultants, reprising a role I had played in 2012 when Donald Trump briefly considered a candidacy that year. I performed consulting work for the campaign for 5 months, and the consulting relationship ended in August of 2015. I, however, did not go quietly into the night. I continued to work, write, and advocate on behalf of the Trump candidacy because to this day, I believe that Donald Trump has the potential to be a truly great and transformative president and to make our country great again. These hearings are largely based on a yet unproven allegation that the Russian state is responsible for the hacking of the DNC and John Podesta, and the transfer of the information to WikiLeaks. No member of this committee and no intelligence agency can prove this assertion. Because the DNC steadfastly refused to allow the FBI to examine their computer servers, this entire claim is based on a self-serving report by CrowdStrike, a forensic IT firm retained by, directed by, and paid for by the DNC. The Nation magazine recently reported on a study issued by Veteran Intelligence Professionals for Sanity, or VIPS, which is comprised of a number of former high-level U.S. intelligence officials. Based on their study, the Nation concluded, and I quote, "There was no hack of the Democratic National Committee system on July 5, 2016. Not by the Russians and not by anyone else. Hard science now demonstrates it was a leak, a download executed with a local memory key or a similar portable data storage device, such as a thumb drive. In short, they reported it was an inside job by someone with access to the DNC's computer system. This casts serious doubt on the alleged initial hack that led to the very consequential publication of a large store of documents by WikiLeaks last summer. Additionally, these unproven allegations have led to a frivolous lawsuit filed by former Obama administration lawyers against me and the Trump campaign. In my motion to dismiss, I submitted a sworn declaration from Dr. Virgil Griffith, a cognitive computer graduate from the California Institute of Technology, who questioned the unproven assumption that Russian hackers are responsible for the theft of DNC emails and other data. I recognize that those who believe there was collusion between the Trump camp and the Russian state now say Stone must have been involved, but that is not based on one shred of evidence. This is nothing more than conjecture, supposition, projection, allegation, and yes, coincidence, none of it proven by evidence of fact. Understand the committee's interest in me. I use all clauses of the First Amendment to achieve my goals. I'm out there. I am provocative and unpartisan, but let's be clear, I have no involvement whatsoever in the alleged activities that were within the scope of this committee's investigation. Collusion with the Russian state to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. I have every right to express my views in the public square. I actively participate in matters of great public concern. I also believe, and you should too, my friend Tucker Carlson, who said last week, quote, "You should never accept uncritically the imprecise conclusions of the intel community." The mantra-like repetition of the theme by our vaunted 17 intelligence agencies that the Russians colluded with the Trump campaign to affect the 2016 election does not make it so. These are, after all, the very same people who insisted that North Korea would not be able to launch a viable rocket for 3 to 5 years, that insisted Saddam Hussein was in possession of weapons of mass destruction, there was no torture at Abu Ghraib prison, and the government had no metadata collection program, at least until Edward Snowden revealed otherwise. Our intelligence agencies have become politicized. I realize that they are deeply unhappy over President Trump's refusal to expand the proxy war in Syria and their failure to obtain the no-fly zone promised to them by Hillary Clinton, which would have been an open invitation to World War III. That the intelligence agencies have continued to leak to the detriment of President Trump in violation of the law is proof positive of their politicization. Members of this committee have made 3 basic assertions against me, which must be rebutted here today. The charge that I knew in advance about and predicted the hacking of Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's email, that I had advanced knowledge of the source or actual content of the WikiLeaks disclosures regarding Hillary Clinton, or that my now public exchange with a persona that our intelligence agencies claim but cannot prove is a Russian asset is anything but innocuous and are entirely false. Again, such assertions are conjecture, supposition, projection, and allegations, but none of them are facts. For example, Mr. Schiff, the ranking member of this committee, asked, "Is it a coincidence that Roger Stone predicted that John Podesta would be the victim of a Russian hack and have his private emails published, and did so even before Mr. Podesta himself was fully aware that his private emails would be exposed? To be clear, I never made any such prediction. I want to know where I predicted this. Can Mr. Schiff read us the exact quote and source from which I predicted the hacking of Podesta's email? Can Mr. Schiff even come up with a documented quote where I used Podesta and email in the same sentence before it happened? My tweet of August 21st, 2016, in which I said, "Trust me, it will soon be Podesta's time in the barrel, #CrookedHillary," must be examined in context. I posted this at a time that my boyhood friend and colleague, Paul Manafort, had just resigned from the Trump campaign over allegations regarding his business activities in Ukraine. I thought it manifestly unfair that Podesta not be held to the same exact standard. Note that my tweet of August 21st, 2016 makes no mention whatsoever of Mr. Podesta's email, but does accurately predict that the Podesta brothers' business activities in Russia with the oligarchs around Vladimir Putin, their uranium deal, their bank deal, their Gazprom deal, would all come under public scrutiny. Podesta's activities were later reported by media outlets as diverse as the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg. My extensive knowledge of the Podesta brothers' business dealings in Russia is based on the Panama Papers, which were released in early 2016. They reveal that the Podesta brothers had extensive dealings in Russia. The tweet is also based on a comprehensive early August opposition research briefing provided to me by investigative reporter Dr. Jerome Corsi, which I then asked him to memorialize in a memo that he sent to me on August 31st, all of which was culled from public records. There was no need to have John Podesta's email to learn that he and his presidential candidate were in bed with the clique around Putin. In fact, factcheck.org, a news organization funded by the Annenberg Foundation, reported, quote, "There is nothing in the public record so far that proves Stone, a political operative and longtime Trump associate, predicted the Podesta email hack." Now let me address the charge that I had advanced knowledge of the timing, content, and source of the WikiLeaks disclosures from the DNC. On June 12, 2016, WikiLeaks publisher Julian Assange announced that he was in possession of the Clinton DNC emails. I learned this by reading a tweet on Twitter. I asked a journalist who I knew had interviewed Assange to independently confirm this report, and he subsequently did. The journalist assured me that WikiLeaks would release this information in October and continued to assure me of this throughout the balance of August and all of September. This information proved to be exactly correct and accurate. I referred publicly to this journalist as an intermediary, go-between, and mutual friend. All of these monikers are equally true. In the March 20th public session of this committee, Mr. Schiff asked former FBI Director Comey, "Are you aware that Mr. Stone also stated publicly that he was in direct communication with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks?" The way the question was asked was clearly designed to cast me in a bad light. Yet I have never said or written that I had any direct communications with Julian Assange, and have always clarified in numerous interviews and speeches that my communications with WikiLeaks was through the aforementioned journalist. Again, Mr. Schiff is guilty of a false assertion. The fact is that during the March 20th Comey hearing, and many times subsequently, members of this committee and even the Democratic nominee for president felt that they could go into the public square and make similar charges without any substantiation or basis of fact. Mr. Heck of Washington, for example, said, "We've heard quite a few individuals in the Trump orbit who fell somewhere on the spectrum of mere naivete, disturbing enough if this naivete is a feature of those who were supposed to be running our country and foreign policy, to unwitting Russian dupes, to willing blindness, to active coordination. This rogues gallery includes already fired Roger Stone, advisor to Donald Trump. This is the worst kind of McCarthyism by Mr. Heck. To be clear, I have never represented any Russian clients, have never been to Russia, and never had any communications with any Russians or individuals fronting for Russians in connection with the 2016 presidential election." To pile on, in an interview on MSNBC on May 19, 2017, Congresswoman Jackie Speier of this committee felt compelled to say, quote, "I believe that Michael Caputo is part of a cabal, including Roger Stone and Paul Manafort and others, who had business relationships in Russia. No, Congresswoman, I've never had any business relationships in Russia or with any Russian entity. You have lied and accused me without evidence. You should apologize today." One more apology I would demand in public if she were here today is from the presidential runner-up, the queen of sour grapes, Hillary Clinton. Following the lead of the minority members of this committee in her new fictional book, she repeats the same false narratives about me as if they were the truth, yet they could not be further from the truth. And then there's Congressman Eric Swalwell, who is reported in Newsmax said, "Mr. Roger Stone, we hope to learn the same things we learned from Paul Manafort, Carter Page, Don Trump Jr., and others who were particularly active in their dealings with the Russians during the summer of 2016. Has Mr. Swalwell read my exchange with the Twitter persona which he alleges constitutes collusion? The exchange is innocuous at best. Since I had no other contact with any Russians, what else could he be referring to? Finally, let me fully address this limited, benign, and now entirely public exchange with a persona on Twitter calling themselves Goosefer 2.0. While some in the intelligence community have claimed that Guccifer 2.0 is a Russian cutout and that he or it is responsible for the hacking of the DNC, neither of these assertions can be proven by this committee or the aforementioned intelligence community. I wrote in an article for Breitbart on August 5th, 2016, in which I expressed my view that Guccifer 2.0 was not a Russian asset, at the same time reporting his claim, taking credit for hacking the DNC. My only exchange with Guccifer would begin in August 14th, 2016, after my article appeared, and ran through September 9th, 2016. Imagine my deep disappointment when Mr. Schiff purposely conflated these dates before this committee, reversing them to create the impression that I had communicated with Guccifer 2.0 prior to the publication of the article, questioning whether Guccifer was a Russian cutout. Shame on you, Mr. Schiff. You lied. Now that more information is in the public domain, the very question of whether Guccifer hacked the DNC must be revisited in light of the VIP's report cited by The Nation. As they concluded, and I quote, "Forensic investigation of documents made public 2 weeks prior to the July 5th leak by the person or entity known as Guccifer 2.0 show that they were fraudulent. Before Guccifer posted them, they were adulterated by cutting and pasting them into a blank template that had Russian as its default language. Guccifer took responsibility on June 15th for an intrusion in the DNC reported on June 14th and professed to be a WikiLeaks source, claims essential to the official narrative implicating Russia in what was soon cast as an extensive hacking operation. To put the point simply, forensic science now devastates this narrative. I am left to conclude that the president is right when he calls this congressional investigation a witch hunt. Based on what we now know, it is clear that there was a foreign nation which was colluding with a presidential campaign in an attempt to affect the outcome of the 2016 election. Therefore, I strongly urge this committee to invest the numerous publicly documented contacts between Ukraine and the Clinton campaign, particularly in light of recent public reports that Ukraine is now providing sophisticated missile technology to North Korea. Please do not continue to perpetuate falsehoods here today. I now am prepared to take your questions. Thank you.